Oh, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 14 of Frieren. Hey! Last episode, we met our boy, our sweet, sweet, sweet priest who has joined the party, and I'm so excited to have him here. My dogs are going crazy because I've been gone all day at work. It's late at night when I'm getting home, but I just couldn't wait. I needed to see this episode, so you'll have to excuse them barking. That's probably going to be a thing. But I do have some comments I want to talk about before we dive into this episode. I'm so glad we have a party of 4. The odd number was freaking me out, but I wasn't going to say anything. And now we have an even number, and it's like, okay, we're great. Awesome. So, I want to point out Kaku. Kaku talked about the sword of truth, or the sword in the stone. Will Stark get to try for it, or will he not? They were bringing up in their comment, like, is it better for Stark to possibly have a chance to get the sword of truth and use it against the force that could be awakening, that could be a problem? Or would it mean more if Stark didn't try to get the sword and just became a hero regardless? The idea that they were pointing out, you don't need confirmation from others to be a hero. And yeah, that is a good point. There is a part of me that kind of would like Stark to be more of a hero than Himmel, and I know what horrible things to say against our beautiful hero Himmel, but there's a part of me that would like Stark to be the hero and get to use the sword. I think it'd be cool, but then I get the point that him not using it and not needing that validation and him being a hero despite it, I kind of like that. But I mean, it would be cool if the dad and the brother were there and Stark has the sword. It's like, see, you didn't think I was worthy, but clearly I am. So I'm kind of torn. I think I could see it either way working narratively. So whichever direction we go, I'm going to be happy with. But there is a little part of me that's kind of like, I want Stark to get the sword, right? Speaking of which, Pineapple 541 pointed this out, which kind of ties into this. The fact that Himmel is buried with the fake sword instead of the real sword. What is actually kind of fun about that, as Pineapple pointed out, is that everyone believes Himmel was buried with the sword of truth. So technically, that sword is the sword of a hero. It is the real sword of the hero because Himmel was using it. So it kind of becomes one of those things in that, do you define the object or does the object define you? And in Himmel's case, Himmel defines the object. So in that regard, yeah, I can see why Stark denying the sword would be fine, because it would almost seem like the sword was defining Stark. So I get both of the opinions on that. That makes sense. Alessi Colley points out that Stoltz, which is Stark's brother, Stolz means pride. And I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of him being like, the pride of his tribe, the pride of his clan, but also he has pride in his brother. So I thought that was really cool. And then they noted, I thought Alessi was kind of cool for noting this, that the party that defeated the Demon King all these years ago, that they're world renowned for, consists of a fake hero, a corrupt priest, a cowardly warrior, and a disgraced mage. Which, the funny part about that is all those labels, like the fake, the corrupt, the cowardly, and the disgraced, do not in any way describe our party, but they're there technically by default. So I thought that was really cool to note, right? I don't know. I mean, Fern, she's called pious, but she clearly has her mind in the gutter. She doesn't want to admit it. She's being tsundere about it, and we'll see about Sein and the others. And then Mr. Glorious Bastard finally said, Hater, is it possible he lived longer than Himmel because he was a healer? And then what does that mean about Sein? I don't know. My thing is, I don't know D&D. I don't know the tropes of the fantasy storytelling. So I don't know. Is it commonplace that healers just live longer? Is that a thing? They can heal themselves? Seems a little OP, if you ask me. But I guess it depends on how strong their magic is, because like Sein's brother pointed out, he's not as strong as his brother. So his ability to heal himself and live longer is maybe not as successful as what Science could be. So I don't know. I thought those were really good comments. Food for thought for sure with the hero's sword. I don't know if we're going to come back to that cave or not. If we don't come back to the cave and all we got was Stark's little moment where he looks back at the sword and decides not to go for it, then I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that being the last of that. So we'll see. But I'm super excited, y'all, to dive into this episode. I hope you all are too. So we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to start episode 14 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Frieren at the funeral. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. This was so good. How? I should have known, because when I started this series 14 episodes ago, I was like, oh, well, it kind of sucks that Hader is dead, or that Himmel, it sucks that Hader's dead. It sucks that Himmel's dead, and, him and Frieren never got to have this relationship, and everybody in the comments was like, they were like, you don't even know. I could see Himmel knew what he was doing. Himmel was setting it up that she would never be able to move on from him because he was too damn perfect. Too perfect. I'm like, Science, like, there is no hope for me. And just quit being perfect, Himmel. Quit it. He's ruining the standards for men everywhere. He's making them all look a fool. Let's talk about this episode. This episode was it went by really quickly. It also, I was like looking up at the time at one point being like, wow, we're already nearly through this episode. And it was just like a really nice little transition episode. Like, we just met Sein. We just got him to come into the party, where we're still getting used to his presence and like what's his role and dynamic going to be. I kind of like the idea that he acts like this older mentor character, and he makes a good point about Hader without realizing it. Later on, we'll talk about it, but he thinks he's this old man, the sage wisdom, and Frieren's over here like, I am literally over 900 years older than you. He's like, but he makes the point being like, well, by elf standards, you're a child. And she's like, Which is true. When we had Kraft a few episodes ago, Kraft made it seem, looking at her, he was like, oh, you're just a young one. I'm like, oh God, we don't know how these elves live. They could live very long. And so Kraft's like, hey, you're a young one, you're fine. I'm like, oh shit, that's insane, right? So still 29 years after Himmel the Hero and their death, and we're in the Rad region in the Northern Lands. We're just getting acquainted here. I like as they're walking, they're like, oh, there's a lot of shops. And I like that Stark and then we're like, well, let's shop around. And then Frieren thinks back to when she was with the old party. I like that Hader was always wanting to just drink and was looking for bars, being like, look at what we got there. And then Himmel's like, we could totally go on a shopping date together later, Frieren. How about that? Super cute. But let's get past this OP and get back to this. So us starting out where Stark says, you're always so rude to me, and then just like, do you really hate me that much? And then the thing about it is, Fern, I'm sure, lashed out, and I'm sure Fern said something hateful to Stark, but she's honestly not that bad. She's like, Fern is like she's never loud. Fern is never like yelling. She's never yelling or bitching. She's just grumbling and complaining and maybe kicking him. She probably kicked him, and that's probably why he thought she was as angry. But Fern is never like one that does a major outburst of anger or energy. So for him to be like, you're just so mean, it's like, and she's sitting there like, with her badger face, is hilarious. But I do feel for Stark, because he didn't know. He's like, forget it, I'm going back to my master. They are like a bunch of teenagers. I'm coaching a speech team right now, and oh my gosh, it makes me realize that I'm glad I'm not 18 anymore. There's something like science says about the privilege of the young, which is this episode. And one thing that they touch on that I really loved was the idea that when you're young, you have all these arguments and everything's so dramatic, and then you make up. And it's like, it's nothing. I drove home from a tournament with my team, and it was like a 6-hour drive. And the whole drive home, these two competitors, they're friends. They're like best friends. And they were just the whole way home. And it was driving me crazy. And I couldn't say anything because I was trying to drive. I was trying to be nice. I was like, oh my God. I was like, but I wanted to be out of that van so bad. And then by the time we got home, they were best friends again. And I was like, I had to listen to this for 6 hours and now you're besties. I was like, oh, but it's that exact same thing. It was like they went through the whole range of emotions and the roller coaster of, I hate you and I don't like this. And then they stopped and then they were like, do you want to talk about it? And I'm like, oh my God. And when you're young and impetuous, That's so easy to do, right? When you get older, you don't really settle for that anymore. And so if somebody blows up in your face, it's one of those things when you're young and you get in an argument, you're instantly able to get over it and reconcile and go back to being friends instantly because you realize at that age, oh, I lashed out. I shouldn't have done that. Let's be friends. And they're like, oh, I understand, bro. Let's do this. When you're an adult, you're able to sit back usually. We'll talk about, the idea of being an adult here with Hyder in a little bit. But there's that idea that as you're older, you think more. So if you really lash out and you really yell, then you probably really mean it. It's not like you're being a kid and just like being mad. If you're an adult and you have an argument and you lash out, it probably means something very seriously to you. And because of that, it's harder to make up because you're more set in your feelings and more set in your ways than when you're a kid. You're like, oh, I was just mad. It's fine. So, and that's not always the case, but I do see the point that Sein makes about when you're young, you get in arguments a little bit more often just because you're still figuring all that out. I like that Sein instantly is like, are these lovebirds fighting? Like, he gets the idea that these two are together, and Frieren's like, I don't know about that. I don't want to encourage that. Let's all just be platonic till we get rid of this, till we go to heaven and then figure out what we're going to do after that. And, of course, Fern's mad because he didn't get her a present for her birthday. To her, a present is very important, and something that should be remembered. And to Fern in the moment, him forgetting her birthday present means that he doesn't like her. Or he's not considerate of her. But they kind of talked about in the last episode where Stark gets the gift from her that warriors don't normally get each other birthday gifts. So he's not used to it. And then we find out, of course, he's even better because he was going to get her a gift. He didn't know what to get her and he wanted to ask her, but then he was afraid she was going to be mad if he asked her. And then he was mad at himself for not asking her and just going ahead and doing it. And it's like, this was all a major misunderstanding. What can we do with these two, right? And I do like that Frieren's like, you are kind of harsh. You really don't listen to anything he says. And I like that Sein comes in being like, I didn't get her anything. Now, Sein is a little bit sexist here, where he's like, men don't care about little things like birthdays and anniversaries. I'm like, that's a little sexist, Sein. How do we know that? And that's like, are you saying that all women care about anniversaries and birthdays? Because they don't all care about them, I can tell you that. I was just like, I'm glad she kind of kicked him, being like, hey, you're making a lot of assumptions here, Sein. And she's just like, no. Just kicks his knee and she kicks him. He's like, I'll stop, buy you something. And Freeman's like, what can we do about this? I like he says his knees are going to be sore later. Like he's such an old man. Mm-hmm. He's like, I feel sorry for Stark. I'm old enough to let most callousness go, but girls can make the emotions of boys his age swing wildly. Sein makes a lot of assumptions about lots of things. I'm like, oh, you are assuming quite a lot and stereotyping all these young men quite a bit, Sein. We'll let it go because you're hot, but it's interesting. He seems he's very traditionalist in his ways in the patriarchal structure. He's very traditionalist, and I'm like, I don't know. I would argue that Hyder's emotions were running wild not because of Frieren being around him, but of a small 4-foot dwarf. But you keep thinking that, Sein. You keep thinking that. Sure. He even thought he knew about Hyder, and Frieren's like, you don't know everything. So I do like Sein a lot, but some of his views in this episode, I was like, oh, dude. Oh, you shall be proven wrong, probably. But I do like that he feels for Stark. I do like that Sein is here to help Stark and be, because Stark does need somebody he can relate to in a way that I do think there is something to it that Sein going to him and being like the wise older man does help Stark a bit. And I'm glad he has that, kind of like Fern having Frieren. I'm glad that does exist. And Frieren's like, yeah, you should probably go see him. Sein's not totally full of crap. You should probably go do that. And poor Stark. Stark is like, Stark is the new Himmel. And I like Himmel a lot, right? I love me some Himmel. But Stark melts my heart because he's such a golden retriever. He's such a good guy. He's trying so hard. He just, he's a teenage boy. And when he looks down at that bracelet that she got him and realizes how much it meant to her, oh, my heart just sank. Like some of the expressions Stark has in this episode, oh, it just makes me so sad. Like if Frieren had this reaction to Stark that Fern had with him, Himmel would have melted into the floor, would have been a puddle, never able to recover again. I also like that Sein, in his own way, tries to like help Fern, and Fern goes to him for advice because he's a priest like Hyder, and she feels like she can, talk to him perhaps. I also like that he assumes she likes butterflies because of the hair clip, and the hair clip is from Frieren, so that's funny. I thought that was nice. And he's like, you just don't know how to interact with boys your age. And yeah, I mean, they're kids, they're teenagers, but they've never really been around people their own age before. They've always been around these older figures. So, sure, and these older figures aren't interested in one another. So he's like, oh, to be young. And she's like, I don't want to choose. I want you to choose for me. Because otherwise, if you let me choose my gift, what kind of birthday gift is that? And Sion's like, look, you need to be a little bit easier on Stark. I know you gave him a present, but the boy doesn't ever even remember his own name, his own birthday. So you can't be too harsh on him. And he's like, well, but you guys went together to find his gift. So maybe he wanted to go with you. And then they talk a little bit more and he convinces her to go back. He's like, he's just a kid. He's slow on the uptake, but you want to make up with him, right? And then she does. And he's like, I'm going back to the inn. You take care of it. I like that Frieren was watching this entire thing from the rooftops. She's just like gremlining her way over there. Frieren's just like, I'm just checking. And I like that Sein finds her on the roof. That's hilarious. And of course, Stark looks up to Himmel. So he finds that statue. It's interesting that Himmel's by himself in the statue in the town, but we've been to another town where there was just a statue of Himmel. So maybe the others were just like, I feel like Himmel left this statue here as a reminder to Frieren when she found it. Like if there were memories here in this town, he left her, like of the shopping and everything, he left that statue there so she wouldn't forget about him and forget those memories. As if she could. As if you could forget a memory like that of him essentially proposing to her. Because he knew what the ring meant. He knew the flowers meant eternal love. I can't with that whole proposal scene. I cannot, because he knew what the ring meant. He proposed to her. And she probably at the time didn't realize what it meant. And she was like, oh, okay. And now she knows. And what sucks for Himmel is he loved her. But I think he knew, he was like, I can't be with an elf. She's so much older than me. And she's going to outlive me. And it's fleeting. And she doesn't even know, but he's like, I'm going to devote my heart and soul to her, even if she doesn't understand. And I'm like, how dare show? How dare? The cruelest thing. The cruelest thing. And then I like the animation when Stark turns around and faces Fern. That was really, really well done. And then he's like, I wanted to choose a gift with you since I didn't know what you liked. And she's like, then let's go get that gift. I love it. She's so sweet. I like that she realizes Stark's kind of an idiot, but he's our idiot, and I do love him. And in the pose with Himmel, there is the fake sword. So I love that Frieren and Sein are like watching over these two. I felt bad for Stark because whenever Sion's like, oh, the mirrored lotus means eternal love. You guys are lovers. And Stark's like, oh, no. I kind of felt bad for Stark because even though I ship Stark and Fern a lot and I want them to be endgame, I can understand why Stark does not want to have all of those emotions running rampant while they're on a mission, because he's like, I don't want to focus on that now. I want to get to our mission and take care of that, and I don't want to have to think about this right now. I totally get that, and so I feel bad for him because I'm like, come on, Sein, Sion's trying to push so hard for them to be in a relationship, and Frieren, it's funny, Sein is pushing really hard to point out the chemistry between them, and Frieren is the polar opposite, where she's like, I guess if it happens, it happens. I don't know. These ain't my kids. I'm not stopping them. So, and I like that Science says you understand relationships better once you're older, and Frieren like is on the roof like, what am I, chopped liver? I'm like 1,000 years older than you. What are you doing? And he's like, that couldn't have been easy for you, Frieren, to be looking after these two kids. And she's like, And he's like, well, you're a kid after all too. What's so funny is that he considers her I like that he likes older women, but by Frieren's elf standards, she's not old, so he's not into her. And I'm like, also, after this episode, I'm pretty sure the ghost of Himmel would track down anyone trying to get with Frieren, so it's probably better that Kraft went off. Okay, when they show the flashback of Hader that's hung over, the look on Eisen's face where Eisen's like, I told you not to drink that much, but you did anyway. It's hilarious. Poor Hader. He tried. She's like, he lied all the time. He was hungover all the time. He was just a corrupt priest. And she's like, but you're even more depraved. I like that Sein looks up so much to Hader. It's great. It's like the Hader I remember was a kind and dependable old man. Unlike me, he was an ideal grown-up. And I loved this conversation with Frieren and Hader talking about pretending to be grown up. That's such a good conversation. Because I was talking about this actually today with this girl that I had as a student. And she's now trying to become a teacher. And she was talking about, she's like, I'm trying to teach these kids, but I'm just learning the material as I'm student teaching them. So I'm always like just one step ahead of them. And I'm like, girl, my whole first year of teaching, that was it. Like I was reading the stories the night before class to make lecture notes, to talk to these students about this story I just read and was like, what can I dig out of this to talk about? And then I get in there and they were like, so what do you think about this? And I'd have to pull something out of my ass and be like, yeah, this is it. And they're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, when you get started, like becoming an adult, you're faking it till you make it like 70% of the time. And when I was younger, the people that were my age, I thought they had their whole lives together. I thought that once you became an adult, you figured everything out. The world made sense. You have all the things organized and together in your life. Everything was going to be peachy keen. And then when you get to be an adult, you're like, not really. Like you can still be yourself. When Hader's like, I haven't changed since I was a child. I was like, yeah, you can still be yourself and you can still be, age is a number, they say, but it's one of those things where like you grow up and you gain more knowledge and that gives you some maturity, but you're still yourself at the end of the day. So a lot of times when people think, oh, you're an adult, you know what you're doing. It's like, not always. And a lot of it's just pretending to be an ideal adult until you finally become one. And I love that conversation that Hader has with Frieren about it. It's so well done. And her being like, And when he tells her, he's like, I've been pretending to be an adult until I can make it as an ideal grown up. And I'll keep pretending until the day I die. And he talks about Fern basically has kind of a praise kink. He's like, she likes being praised and she needs guidance. So you gotta do a little hand holding, help her along the way. He's like, I need somebody to praise me, but I'll have to probably wait until I get to heaven to get my reward. And she's like, well, I'll praise you. And then when she puts that hand down, I want to get a little shot of her right there with the hand there. When she puts the hand down to give him the head pats, it was so freaking cute. And Hader's like, I like that she gives Sein the head pats, and he's like Hader thinks it's the most adorable thing ever. And he's like, oh, I'll put in a good word with you in heaven for doing that, Frieren. I like when she does it for Sein. He's like, I wish you were 80 years older. He's like, I wish you were an old elf and then I would be attracted to you. And it's like, come on now, Sein. Come on now. It's really funny. But yeah, they pick out the rings. I like Stark's expression as she picks it out. And he's just like, he's like looking at her. I like that he's so tender there where he's just like, is it good? Do you like it? And she's wearing it. And he's just like, oh my gosh, she's wearing the thing that I got her. And now they have matching bracelets. Bitches, they have matching bracelets. We are good to go. Mm-hmm. I love it. I think that's amazing. When Frieren did the gesture, like that she was going to give Hader the head pat, it almost reminded me of a scene from Monster where the hand comes towards the screen just for a split second. That's all. So they're in the Banned Woods located in Northern Lands. They're on their trail again. I like that anytime we see, 29 years post Himmel, it's a sign of like a new chapter in the manga or something. So they're like, well, thank you, kind sir. I like that Frieren is thanking this gentleman on his horse for giving the carriage ride. They're like, there weren't any passenger carriages here, so we appreciated it. And he's like, well, we help each other when we're in need. And I'm actually a merchant in the town up ahead. And I run an accessory shop there. Oh, and he's like, are you interested? And she's like, oh, you're a good salesman. I like that Frieren's like, what you got? You got watches in that jacket? Come on. That is really clever. I thought it was incredibly, I missed that line about him running an accessory shop because in the episode, when he just happens to have a spell to help find the ring, I was like, that's awfully convenient, but he runs an accessory shop. So if you're trying to find an item that's been stolen or you can't find it and it's missing, then a spell to locate it would be highly efficient. I'm like, that makes sense. So I thought that was really well done. I liked that a lot. That was great. I'm just like, this episode, this second half, the fact that they all got picked up by this massive bird is hilarious. This bird monster. I feel like the second half of the episode is just world building and also establishing that the ring and the bracelet have the eternal love sign for both of them. And Stark didn't realize it when he picked it out. Frieren didn't realize it when she picked her ring out, but here we are. And also because I like to point out that Frieren's very disorganized and she's like, leave me alone. I have just a suitcase of proclivities. What can I do? And a full bottle of wine. So the other thing is I like that we established that there are monsters that can literally carry them away. Avian monsters, they can conceal their mana and they just show up. I also like that we explain why there can't be a flying carriage. I like, because that's, it's the Lord of the Rings Eagles conversation. Well, why don't we just fly our way to heaven? And they're like, no, we can't do that. We don't know the mechanism or the principles, so we can only do so much, right? And basically the way that they have levitated and flown in the past was by alternating a demon spell, kind of like what they did with Zoltrak. They're just alternating it. And I like that she's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You take the merchant, I'll take Sein, and Stark, you just jump down. And Stark's like, no, I'll die. And Frieren's like, well, Eisen never died, or why would you die? And he's like, Eisen's not human. He's a bad point. They keep comparing Stark to Eisen. I'm like, Stark's also a dwarf, or Eisen's a dwarf, and Stark is a human. I do think there might be some differences. Also, the fact that Eisen made a little crater to help ease Hyder's fall. That's true love, everyone. That is true love. He Yamcha'd himself to the ground so that Hyder could land peacefully. That's a true gentleman. And I love the meme of Hyder was appalled. He's just appalled by Eisen in so many ways, but you say appalled, I say attracted to, so we can agree to disagree or whatever. I ship Eisen and Hyder so much. He was far from normal. And then she's like, well, we can possibly, stop the carriage right before it lands using our magic. But if we don't do it properly, everybody's going to die. So I guess it's a risk we take. I like the Frieren's like, YOLO, guys, right? I like Science like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. I love that she just comes out of the wagon, decapitates the bird, doesn't try to incapacitate it, just like, oh, demon bird, bye, boop. This checks with her aversion of demons. And she's like, well, I guess we might as well try. And Stark is terrified. Frieren's just hanging on the edge of the wagon like, no, we're good. Fern is like meditating, going, gee, I hope we don't die. The one guy in the carriage, you can't really see him, but his arms and legs are everywhere. And Science like, well, if this is how I go, this is how I go. Don't have any choice at this point. And then they manage to like save themselves at the last minute. I love that the horse is suspended in midair. That part's really, really good. So they do pretty well with fixing this carriage. They do pretty well with all of that. And then Sein finds out about the bracelet, that it's a really good gift because he chose it, even though it took him 3 hours to pick it out. But when he says that, I really am glad that I did because she likes it. And Sein, I'm sure, knew that they were saying it loud enough for her to hear. But it all went so well. Sein's like, that's exactly what you need to say, Stark. That's exactly what you need to say. Because then she's like, fine, you're a baka, but I guess I like you. I love it. I honestly, we've had this series kind of build up their relationship slowly. And ever since Sein has come, he's been like, let's go. Let's push it out here. I don't know how I feel about it. I like the idea of Stark and Fern kind of realizing that they like each other. It we've been going so slow that the escalation almost feels a little fast for me, but I mean, I'm fine with it. It's okay. I'm just like, I don't want it to be so fast that the two characters back off and they're like, oh no, we don't like each other. We're fine. I don't want that. I'd rather it like be a slow burn progression that leads to confirmation than for it to be rushed and then be like, oh no, we're just friends. I'll return the gift if you don't want me to. And Sein thinks he's helping, but Stark's like, oh shit, I don't want her to think that we're lovers. Because I don't think Stark and Fern are at that lover stage. I think they both like each other, but they're so awkward socially about it that it's like they need time for it all to sink in. Right? And she's like, you put a lot of effort, so let's me just keep the gift. But yeah, so they managed to kill Stark kills this giant ass pig and they cook it up. I'm like, that's a lot of work. Sein was like, could you have found a smaller boar for me to like cook up for you? No? Okay, that's fine. And then poor Frieren just like sleeps on top of Fern. I mean, I guess if it was cold, I would not complain about it. But she's been going back through the woods looking for the ring every night. Because clearly it means a lot to her. So yeah, they fix the wagon up and Frieren tries to find the ring. Fern, once she realizes what Frieren is looking for, is like, oh, I'm going to help you find that ring because Fern knows how much the bracelet means to her from Stark. So she clearly thinks if Frieren at all considers this ring remotely as valuable as I consider this bracelet, then it's really important that I help you find it. And she's like, well, I'll give up if I can't find it tonight. And Fern says, you do know that the, mirrored lotus means eternal love. And Frieren's like, I didn't know. And that's the thing. She's like, I didn't know. So I like to believe that Himmel knew that Frieren didn't know. Because some people might argue and be like, oh, well, once Himmel found out that it meant eternal love, or he knew, he was like, oh, Frieren likes me. No, I think that Himmel knew that Frieren had no clue what the flowers meant. That he knew. But he thought it was probably like a funny irony being like, oh, this means eternal love and she has no clue that I love her. How about this? So, girl did not pick up on any of the hints. I think the proposal style handing you of the ring would have been a sign that there might have been something up. But they do the locator spell, and all I could think about was like Howl's Moving Castle, where there's a moment where there's all these sparks and rainbows, and it's like a ring is involved in that scene in that movie, and this was exactly like it. I was like, oh, Frieren's animated really well where she's looking for it and casting that spell. It's done really well. And so she just picks up the random ring and gives it to him, and he's like, well, aren't you going to put any more thought into it? And then he sees the flowers, and he's like, no, this'll do. This is fine. And then as he's looking at the ring, it's like he's looking at that ring as they're walking away, and he's like, do I do it? Do I propose to her with this ring that means eternal love and give it to her? And I feel like the only reason that Himmel does it at this point is because he knows she doesn't understand what it means. And he's like, I'm never going to get to propose to her for real. And I'm never going to get to marry her for real. And she's probably never going to love me the way that I love her. So because she's not going to understand what it means, for myself, I'm going to propose to her with this ring and then just be like, I did it. Because he's holding it and he's like, all right. And he goes in front of her and she's like, what? And then he gets down, cape billowing in the breeze. And she's like, what? And he holds up the hand to put it on there. I'm like, oh my God. I cannot, y'all. I cannot. I'm just the privilege of the young. He's like, I'm going to give this to you now. My thing is, did she take it off? She clearly took it off because it's been in that suitcase, but maybe she was afraid that it would get lost in a fight or something like that. Maybe she took it off when he died. I'd have to go back and rewatch the first couple episodes, but the fact that he did that with that ring and then he's just sitting there so pleased and proud of himself. And she's like, what is this? I'm just so floored. And then she still has the ring, right? Holding it in her hand. I like the Fern's like, aren't you glad you didn't give up, Miss Frieren, on getting the ring back? And like Frieren looks at it like, she says, maybe. We all know that means yes. We all know that means absolutely yes. And then she's like, why are you wearing a mirrored lotus bracelet? And she's like, because Stark is an idiot. And Stark's like, why? Why do I get pestered so much? Oh, this episode. So freaking good. I feel like it is a transitional episode. So this episode just giving us more time to kind of figure out Sein's role in the group. His dynamic is kind of the older man, the sage man wisdom. And Frieren's like, okay. But I thought that was really, really good. I like that we got that episode setting this up, setting up that Stark and Fern have this relationship kind of brewing there to make us realize that Himmel's the most perfect soul imaginable. Like, just all of it. It's so good. Oh my God. This episode was amazing. Fantastic. And I feel like I'm about to go on a trip in a couple days, and I'm going to be gone for a week. So I will have to check out I'm probably going to watch one more episode before I go. I'll probably watch episode 15 before I go on my trip, but I won't have time to answer any comments between now and episode 15. So if I get to episode 15 and watch it before my trip, then for 16, I definitely will have time to read comments and possibly address some of those in a future episode. So in any case, I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. Oh my God, Fangirl City. I can't wait to hear your comments down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Bye!